Hello and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will, and with me as always is the bee's knees herself,
Sarah.
And today we're doing a two-player perspective and accessibility for Apiary. Now if you want to check out our opinion, check out our other video, Rolling with Reviews, Apiary. Sarah, tell us a bit about this game.
All right. In Apiary, each player controls one of 20 unique factions. Your faction starts the game with a hive, a few resources, and worker bees. In this worker placement game, you will explore planets, gather resources, develop technologies, and create carvings. However, your workers can only take a few actions before they must hibernate. Whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game wins. All right, Will, how does the game change for two players?
So for two players, you'll actually look at the main board. One side has for players 1 through 3, and the other side for 4 players.
4 and 5.
4 and 5. So you'll choose the right side for that. And then for 2 players, you'll only use 2 of the hibernating hives. It's combs.
Combs, yeah.
And that's going to be how the game concludes, because you have to fill those combs up for the game to end. There is no bot. The only bot that's in the game is for solo play. So, and it's one that can't be just spiced into a 2-player to act as a 3-player. It doesn't work that way. It's specifically designed for a single player.
Yes.
So those are the changes for a 2-player.
Yes. And so one of the things before we get into issues and what the game does well at 2 players, we kind of wanted to state that the game in general, for 2 players, just the pace is slower.
Yes.
And so whether that is a good thing or a bad thing is going to be completely to taste. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. It's just...
Yeah. There's less bees to go around, so there's less spots to share on the board from time to time.
Yeah.
And it's not all the time. Sometimes you do have a lot of interaction. Other times you don't.
Right. So it's just how the game feels is just a bit slower because there's not as many people doing things. Okay, so issues, this is where we were also kind of split.
Yeah.
I felt that there should be more player interaction and especially more movement of the tile rows. There were points where they did move, but there were also points where they stayed stagnant for a very long time. And this is a common issue I've felt in a lot of 2-player games because there's not a normal mechanism that it routinely moves. If there's stuff in the row that you don't like, it's not going to move until someone buys something. Or when you finally get to hibernating bees, which doesn't happen for a while, you could start taking up hibernation comb spots that will discard a row and refresh it. So then you'll have this sudden flurry of a whole bunch of rows refreshing, but it's once mid-game.
Yeah, and you also have to worry about that because then that helps the person that goes after you the next. Yeah. Because then they see the full refresh.
Right. And for me with the player interaction, because a lot of the spots, you add up the value of the dice that are there to get the strength of what you get to do. In a 2-player game, there was just several points where it felt like, well, it felt like that I was the one going to the same spot. So it was me and my own dice where Will had maybe placed a higher value die at a different spot. And I just kind of would have been nice if it had been at the place I wanted. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I just didn't feel like there was enough player interaction. Will, on the other hand...
Yeah, Sarah felt very disconnected. I, on the other hand, felt that there was a lot of good player interaction because the main way you explore the galaxy is through a shared giant mother bee ship that goes from planet to planet. That's all shared, and that's self-defined by the players, so you have a good player agency. Also, there are a couple of spots that have 2 dice spots. And whether it's your dice or someone else's dice, those shared spots were nice ways of player interaction. I didn't have a problem with the tiles not moving because sometimes I needed the time to plan out to get those things. And sometimes in certain parts of the game, it's not important to buy certain tiles.
That is true.
So I felt that because of how I approached planning my turns, I always felt the game was moving forward and having something to do. And I think where Sarah was seeing a lot of the issue is she got to the end of whatever she had currently planned and didn't necessarily have the next thing planned out. So therefore she had to stop, rethink, refocus, replan, and then move forward, and why she was seeing a lot of start and stop type of an experience.
Yeah, so this is going to be an interesting one for both our accessibility, or the two-player experience here, and then our review. We had very different experiences playing the same game.
Yes.
So that's going to be an interesting one. Okay, but I think that does summarize our two-player experience. It really is going to come down to taste of whether you like the slower pace of it. Player interaction is going to be what you make of it. Accessibility. Okay. So the hex tiles are a bit hard to read from a distance, and this only matters when they're on the board to buy, because once you place them in your
hive mat.
Yeah, thank you, hive mat. It's right next to you, you can see it, it's fine. So for me, I just found that I was picking up those tiles a lot to read them because they were at the top of the board, and of course, having it face me, I was sitting at the bottom of the board, so it's a big board. So that was just not fun to have to constantly pick them up. As for the hive mats, they get stacked and messy very, very quickly. Do you want to cover it?
Yeah, so the hive mat will have some pre-printed spots that can get filled up. So you'll be putting little hex tiles on that. Those hex tiles, depending on what they are, might also get resources. For example, if they're farm tiles, they'll actually be able to hold your resources. So you have to put them there as well. Then you'll have frames, and frames are these flat kind of mats that then get placed on top of the boards in empty spots. And then you'll put hive tiles on top of those, and of course, if they're farm tiles, you can also put resources on top of those. And then it also goes in any direction you decide to build it, which means that it can start overlapping your seed cards
at the bottom
of the board.
Yeah.
So handling that space is tricky, and you don't necessarily know where to exactly put everything.
The hardest part really is when you get tiles that say build certain things around me. That
adjacency.
Thank you. Requirement is really where it gets messy, because otherwise you could just put these extra frames up and then they won't cover your seeds. But if you had anything down in the lower section that said, I want these things next to me, well, then you're going to build frames next to that, which means it's going to spill down in front of you. And then the whole keeping your resources on all those farm tiles, I get why, but that is just an extra layer of it, especially as you start to take resources off. All of a sudden you have resources spread out across your hive, so you have empty spots and then full spots, and so you may not always have a good accounting of what all your resources are
and what you can exactly hold,
and exactly what you can hold,
because not all spaces are built equal. Some spaces can only hold one specific resource.
Yes, exactly.
While others can hold like 2 types of resources.
Or 3 or whatever. So yeah, it can just get a little overwhelming and a little messy. Okay, so for the dice, when we played, Will always plays red and I always play blue. So I was originally just going to say the dice have poor contrast with their numbers. But as I was setting up the photos, I realized blue and red are the darkest dice colors, and therefore, because the numbers are not painted to have high contrast with the dice, they're just kind of like a wash. So there is sort of two-toneness to it. Anyways, they're the darkest ones. So they're hard to read from a distance. I was constantly picking up the dice to read what the number was because I couldn't read the number. So on the board, I'm like, okay, I'm putting a die here, but I don't know what like Will's die is when it's there. So I need to know what the numbers add up to. But if you play with the lighter colored dice, there's a gray, a yellow, and a light green, they're better. I would still say the dice numbers should have been painted for higher contrast, but they're at least better.
I wonder if you can like shine a little pin light on them and see if, because they have a very sharp profile.
True, they are recessed, so
Yeah.
like it is three-dimensional. It's just, yeah, it can be kind of flat. So maybe using a pointed light would
Yeah.
have helped. So that is unfortunately an issue if you're having trouble reading the dice numbers. Hopefully you can pick a lighter color of player color. Speaking of, you're going to have potential colorblind issues with the player cubes and the player, the little bee, I forgot what they're called, but they go into the hibernation comb.
They look like little bullets.
They do look like little bullets. But the colors are red, blue, light green, yellow, and gray for player colors. But because these pieces get mixed up on the board, you'll need to know which one's yours. So at lower player counts, it's going to be a lot easier for you to pick colors so that nobody has any issues with, everybody's color. Higher player counts might have issues if you have more than one player with colorblind accessibility challenges.
Yeah, that's mostly important because at the end of the game, you actually do give out points based on majorities in the combs.
Right. And the cubes are used for when you create a dance, which not everyone's going to create a dance, but you will get benefits when someone else uses your dance. So you do need to be able to see your color cube.
More to remember.
Yeah, more to remember.
But it's the scoring cubes and the
yeah.
Queen's Favor cube.
Yes, those are going to be much more important that you can tell the difference. So you know what your score is at the end of the game.
That could be important.
All right, lastly, the interesting part about this game is it's about bees, but it's about, space bees, but it's still based in bee terminology.
Especially beekeeping.
Yeah, beekeeping. And if you have no knowledge of beekeeping and the terminology of keeping bees, the terminology of the game can be quite hard to learn.
Yeah, or just make you stumble. Like all of a sudden it pops out with like, oh, and then it hits the dearth. You're like,
What's the dearth?
Did they mean they hits the dirt?
Did they die? Is it like a dying
nap?
thing? A dirt nap?
No, it's actually a time of beekeeping where bees are in less production. That's known as the dearth.
And they hibernate.
Yes.
So it was, and I will say it was interesting learning and picking up, researching these things outside the game. I didn't read everything that was in the box, so I don't know if there was anything that actually talked about beekeeping terminology. I don't think there was, but that maybe would have been helpful. So learning the terminology as is might be a little challenging for people who don't know anything about bees.
Yes.
All right, what it does right, Will found out something that really helps him read the dice.
Yes, so when the dice are in front of me, getting ready to be placed out onto the board, I could just feel the little head and tail section of each bee because they stick out of the dice. And whichever way the antennas were going, I knew which side was up. And oh, that's the 1, that's a 3, that's a 4, that's a 2. I know. Okay. And Sarah never had to tell me what my numbers were because I could just feel, and I didn't need to read any dice since I just had a thing I could actually feel.
Yeah, so it wasn't actually that he was feeling the numbers on the dice, but the appendages of the bee.
Yes.
So he knew which number corresponded to the direction of the head and the tail.
Yes.
I couldn't remember that well. So
You couldn't be bothered to.
I just one extra layer and I'm already trying to figure out so anything else.
You're like, I'm busy here.
I'm busy here trying to figure out this bee thing.
Busy like a bee.
Yep. Okay, so the other good thing is the resources are uniquely shaped. The iconography.
It comes with Rolos.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember that those were wax because they look like Rolos. So every time it came up, I would tell Will, yeah, would you like a Rolo? And he's like, no, I'd like wax, but actually Rolo sounds good too.
Yes. I need to buy some Rolos.
We need to buy some Rolos.
Okay.
Iconography is distinct. There's a teaching guide, so that's really, we didn't use it because we are the type of people who like to read the whole rules, but I think it would be great for somebody who knows the rules, maybe hasn't played it in a while.
Needs a refresher.
Yeah, needs a refresher. You can use the teaching guide to walk people through it, and I think that would be really great. So I think that's a really neat innovation. Also, the rules has a table of contents. I think that's also fantastic.
And there's an appendix.
So, I mean, there is a lot of cross-referencing to help you find the information that you need. So there is a lot of good accessibility in the cognitive load of trying to learn this game. Now, it is still a little bit on the heavier side,
Sure.
but they did a lot to help you through that.
Yep.
And in the end, it's all open information. Even your seed cards, you can play them open-handed.
Yeah, it says in the rules, you
Yeah.
can play these open-handed if you want.
Right, which is great because there's 3 different things you can use a seed card for, although one of the things is always there, is you can always discard it for a resource.
A basic resource.
A basic resource. But you can use it for a one-time ability at the top, or you can plant it for the end game scoring at the bottom. And because that uses some iconography, it was always easier for me to just read them to Will than for him to try to read a mix of iconography and words, because that's always challenging for you.
Yeah. It meant I didn't have to get up and go use my machine that's in the other room
Right.
and get my steps in.
You can get your steps in some other way.
Yes.
All right, conclusion.
For 2 players.
I think it's going to be to taste. It's not one I think we can say yes or no on.
Right. I would definitely say yes, but Sarah would say I have to really be in the mood for it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I need to, I don't know when it's going to happen, experience what it's like at the higher player count. Maybe that would solidify it one way or another, because maybe there's an aspect of a higher player count that I don't like, and that might prove then I do, because there are a lot of games I much prefer at 2-player over higher player counts.
Yeah.
With this one, I just don't know. I think I would enjoy 3 players. I just don't know about higher than that.
Okay.
Because I do like the slower pace. I just wanted more player interaction.
Right.
So
Accessibility.
it's going to be mostly yes, and easier at a lower player count for the colorblind issues. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it's the boards are messy, and having
Yeah.
to pick up the tiles is probably just going to be something that's always going to be a thing because of just distance.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing, good thing.
Yeah,
It's,
I don't
it's
think
just a thing.
I don't think it's going to be enough to stop someone from playing. It just could be a minor irritant. Mm-hmm. So there, yep. Okay.
All right, and that's it for us. And Sarah,
Yes.
what is your home space B world called?
I don't know. Blossoms.
Blossoms.
What about you?
Earth, because they told us we were Earth bees.
Well, gee, why did you make me go make something up if you already knew what it was?
Because you need to be creative. And why would you ever roll with just one when you can be buzzing with 2? If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach out to us on the various social media platforms at
Rolling with 2, that's TWO. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Discord, we have a channel on Tabletop Express. Check the show notes for the invite link.
If you have time, check out the other content Nanaman has found for you, because remember, he's rolling with you.